The Piyaka disclosure. I. The display of the noble truths. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samsambuddhassa. I. Introduction. The arising of right view. 1. Homage to the fully enlightened ones, who see the ultimate meaning, aim, who have reached perfection in the qualities beginning with virtue. 2. There are two causes, two conditions, for the arising of a hearer's right view. They are another's utterance sequential upon truth, and reasoned attention in oneself. 3. Herein, what is another's utterance? It is any teaching, advice, instruction, talk about truth, in conformity with truth, from another. The truths are four. They are suffering, origin, cessation, and the path. Any teaching, showing, divulging, analyzing, exhibiting, displaying these four truths is called another's utterance in conformity with truth. 4. Herein, what is reasoned attention in oneself? What is called reasoned attention in oneself is any reasoned attention given to the true idea as taught, without adducing any external object. This is called reasoned attention. That mood, when reasoned, is a doorway, a directive, a means. Just as a man is capable of arriving at kindling when on dry ground he rubs a dry sapless log with a dry upper fire stick. Why is that? Because of his arriving at fire with reasoning. So too when he gives attention to this teaching of the undistorted true idea of suffering, origin, cessation, and path, this is called reasoned attention, occurring spontaneously, as the three similes in the Māsakkaka Sutta occurred to the Bodhisattva and not having been previously heard, previously unheard, by him. Now the first two of the three similes, the beginning whoever is not without lust for sensual desires, must be treated as applying to unreasoned attention, but in the last it is well stated for application to reasoned attention. 5. Herein, another's utterance and reasoned attention in oneself, these are the two conditions. Understanding that arises owing to another's utterance is called understanding consisting in what is heard. Understanding that arises owing to reasoned attention in oneself is called understanding consisting in cogitation. These are the two kinds of understanding recognizable. And the two conditions mentioned first, these are the two causes, two conditions, for the arising of a hearer's right view. 6. Herein, that one who does not cognize the meaning, aim, of another's utterance when taught sequential upon truth will be one who experiences the meaning. No such instance is found. And that one who does not experience the meaning, aim, will give reasoned attention. No such instance is found. But that one who cognizes the meaning of another's utterance when taught sequential upon truth will be one who experiences the meaning. Such an instance is found. And that one who experiences the meaning will give reasoned attention. Such an instance is found. This is the cause, this is the object, this is the means, for the hearer's outlet, there is no other. 7. If this hearing is not conjoined with cognizing the thread's meaning, aim, then by following only the sound of the utterance without cognizing the meaning of another's utterance no one can arrive at any more than human idea worthy of a noble one's knowing and seeing. Therefore meanings must be sought by one desirous of attaining extinction of lust, hate, and delusion. The guide in the search. 8. Herein, the consecutive order of the search is this: 16 modes of conveying, 5 guidelines, and 18 root terms. Here is a mnemonic verse. 16 conveyings, as a guide. 5 guidelines for the dispensations. Search, and 18 root terms too. Kakanagata demonstrated. 9. Herein, what are the 16 modes of conveying? They are a teaching, an investigation, a construing, footings, characteristics, a fourfold array, a conversion, an analysis, a reversal, synonyms, descriptions, ways of entry, a clearing up, terms of expression, requisite, coordination. These are the 16 modes of conveying. Here is a mnemonic verse. As teaching, as investigation. Construing, footings, characteristics. Fourfold array, and then conversion. Analysis, reversal 2. As synonyms, and as descriptions. As ways of entry, clearing up. Expression, requisites, 15. Coordination, 16 conveyings. 10. Herein, what are the 5 guidelines? They are the conversion of relishing, the trefoil, the play of lions, the plotting of directions, the hook. Here is a mnemonic verse. Reversal of relishing comes first. In second place the trefoil follows. The lion's play is the name they give to the third guideline, and they named the fourth of guideline formulas. The plotting of directions, then. The hook is what they call the fifth. That is how all 5 guidelines go. 11. Herein, what are the 18 root terms? They are ignorance, craving, greed, hate, delusion, perception of beauty, perception of pleasure, perception of permanence, perception of self, quiet, insight, non-greed, non-hate, non-delusion, perception of ugliness, perception of pain, perception of impermanence, perception of not self. These are the 18 root terms. Herein, 9 terms are unprofitable, wherein all unprofit is collated, and 9 terms are profitable, wherein all profit is collated. What are the 9 unprofitable terms, wherein all unprofit is collated? Ignorance, down to perception of self. These are the 9 unprofitable terms, wherein all unprofit is collated. What are the 9 profitable terms, wherein all profit is collated? Quiet, down to perception of not self. These are the 9 profitable terms, wherein all profit is collated. These are the 18 root terms. Here is a mnemonic verse. The 9 terms, craving, ignorance, and greed, hate, and delusion too, and with as well perversions 4, do constitute defilements plain. The 9 terms, mindfulness foundations, and quiet and insight, and the roots of profit, all this profit, here, does constitute the faculties plain. All profit by 9 terms construed, and all unprofit too by 9, with 9 root terms for each of these. Both sides thus total 18 terms. 12 of these 18 root terms, the 9 unprofitable terms are the origin of suffering, while the profitable terms are the way leading to cessation of suffering. And accordingly, the fruit of the origin is suffering, while the fruit of the way leading to cessation of suffering is cessation. These are the 4 noble truths, which were taught by the Blessed One at Benares. 13. Herein, while the letters, the terms, the phrases, the moods, the language, and the demonstrations, of the noble truth of suffering, are of ungorged measure, they are taught nevertheless by an explaining, displaying, divulging, analyzing, exhibiting, and describing, of that very meaning. And so of all the truths. 14. Accordingly each one of the truths must be searched as to its letters, terms, phrases, moods, language, and demonstrations, of ungorged measure, the phrasing for variety of meaning, and also the meaning for variety of phrasing. 4. Were any monk or divine to say thus, having rejected this suffering, I shall describe another suffering, that would have but his words for basis, and were he questioned, he could never substantiate it. Such are the truths. 15. And whatever thread, song, prose exposition, verse, exclamation, saying, birth story, marvelous idea, or question and answer, was uttered by the Blessed One between the night of his finding full enlightenment and the night of his attaining complete extinction is all the wheel blessing of the true idea set rolling made to occur by him. Nor is there anything whatever of the teaching of the enlightened ones, the blessed ones, that is outside the wheel blessing of the true idea. The whole of that thread must be sought among the noble ideas. Herein, in the discerning of the 4 truths, there is the pentad ending with light. These 4 noble truths in detail are as follows. 2. The display of the noble truths. 1. Schedule and definitions. I. The Four Truths, unshared. 16. A. Herein, what is suffering? It is 1. Birth. 2. Aging. 3. Sickness. 4. Death. 13. In short, the 5 categories for assuming are suffering. A. Suffering specific characteristics, unshared. 17. A. Herein is a demonstration of its specific characteristics. 1. Birth has the characteristic of causing to be manifest. 2. Aging the characteristic of overripening. 3. Sickness the characteristic of painfulness as pain. 4. Death the characteristic of decease. 5. Sorrow the characteristic of change in and dissociation from the loved. 6. Lamentation the characteristic of constant crying out. 7. Pain the characteristic of oppressing the body. 8. Grief the characteristic of oppressing cognizance. 9. Despair the characteristic of burning by defilement. 10. Association with the loath the characteristic of meeting the disagreeable. 11. Dissociation from the love the characteristic of losing the agreeable. 12. Not gaining one's wish the characteristic of frustration of purport. 13. The 5 categories for assuming have the characteristic of non-diagnosis. B. Suffering specific characteristics, shared. 14. Aging and death has the characteristic of overripening and decease. 15. Decease and reappearance has the characteristic of decease and manifestation. I. Cont. 3 remaining truths, etc., unshared. 18. B. Origin has the characteristic of making relinking occur. C. Cessation has the characteristic of abandoning origin. D. Path has the characteristic of severing underlying tendencies. 4 truths, shared. 19. ABCD, suffering has the characteristic of sickness, origin, the characteristic of generating, path the characteristic of being the outlet, and cessation the characteristic of peace. 20. And the extinction element without trace left has the characteristic of cessation consisting in non-relinking. 2. Miscellaneous truths, shared. 21. AB. Suffering and origin. AC. Suffering and cessation. AD. Suffering and path. ABC. Suffering and origin and cessation. ABD. Suffering and origin and path. ADC. Suffering and path and cessation. BC. Origin and cessation. BD. Origin and path. BCD. Origin and cessation and path. CD. Cessation and path. Herein, the threads are as follows. 2. Illustrative quotations. I. The Four Truths, unshared. A. Suffering, specific characteristics. A. Unshared. 22. 1. As verse example happy smiley. Right from the first day a man has been conceived inside a womb, he cannot but go ever on, nor going can he once turn back. And as prose example happy smiley the thread in the Ekatarika, namely Nanda, there are these 8 kinds of reappearance in taking a new existence. This is birth. 23. 2. Herein, what is aging? Not having ever led a life divine, or riches gained in youth, they meditate, as do old lapwings that have quite used up the stock of the fishes living in their pond, and the 5 forewarning signs of death among the gods. This is aging. 24. 3. Herein, what is sickness? And therefore whence, O king, thyself dost even thou feel this is aging? O warrior noble, 'tis fruit of action, because this world escapes not action. And there are 3 kinds of sick. This is sickness. 25. 4. Herein, what is death? As the pots of clay the potter makes, though they be small or big or baked or raw, all end in breakage, such is mortal's life. See how they are stricken in the thing they love, like fishes in the puddles of a failing stream. Seeing this, let him wander without craving aught, and countenance no longing for existences. And the Uddakapana Sutta. This is death. 26. 5. Herein, what is sorrow? He sorrows here, sorrows hereafter. In both wise sorrows the evildoer, He sorrows and he mourns to see what he with his own acts defiled. And the three kinds of misconduct. This is sorrow. 27. 6. Herein, what is lamentation? Those who in sensual desires have many a want, are eager, rash and mean, dwell in unrighteousness. With suffering's intrusion on them, they lament. Whatever will become of us after we die? And the three failures. This is lamentation. 28. 7. Herein, what is pain? Stakes of steel even 100. Each one suffered separately. Each one as 'twere burning, blazing, spluttering with a mass of flame. And the thread in the Sakha Sayuta among the Sayutas, namely, great indeed is that fever. This is pain. 29. 8. Herein, what is grief? At the mercy of his thoughts. He meditates as does a miser. When he hears how others blame him, such a man will be abashed. And there are these two ideas that cause regret. This is grief. 39. Herein, what is despair? Just as a goldsmith's furnace burns only within and not without, so too my heart is all afire. Hearing the lotus has been born, and the three fires. This is despair. 31. 10. Herein, what is association with the loathed? As the rust stain that grows out of the iron devours the iron wherefrom it takes its growth, so are led habitual transgressors by their own acts to a bad destination. And the thread in the tools of the Ekatarika, there are these two who misrepresent a perfect one. This is association with the loathed. 32. 11. Herein, what is dissociation from the loved? Just as a man on waking sees no more someone that he had met during a dream, so too no more the person loved he sees, who passes onward when his time is up. And those gods, knowing the true idea, are instructed by means of the three statements. This is dissociation from the loved. 33. 12. Not to get one's wish. Desire-born and willful, if his desires elude him, he becomes as deformed as if pierced by a barb. And Mras 3 daughters. 34. 13. In short, the 5 categories for assuming are suffering: the eye, the ear, also the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. And these are the dread world stuff, whereto cling ordinary men. And at Bhikkhu, there are these 5 categories. This is suffering. b. Characteristics, shared. 35. 14. What is aging and death? Short is this life indeed, one dies within a century of years. Or even if life flows untroubled, still of old age one dies at last. And the Pasanada Sayuta thread in the Sayuta, my lady is dead. This is aging and death. 36. 15. Herein, what is decease and reappearance? All creatures will most surely die, because the end of life is death. According to their acts they go, reaping the fruit of their own acts. This is decease and reappearance. 37. A. The noble truth of suffering can be demonstrated as shared and as unshared, knowing suffering as to its specific characteristics, doing so by means of these threads, and by means of others contained in the ninefold thread that are similar to each, respectively. 38. Verse should be assessed by verses, prose exposition should be assessed by prose expositions. This is suffering. I. The remaining truths, etc., unshared. 39. B. Herein, what is the origin of suffering? Clung to desires, clung with sensual clinging, seeing nothing blameworthy in fetters. Assuredly those clung with fetter clinging will never cross the vast abounding flood. And a thread dealing with the 4 taints. This is the origin of suffering. 40. See herein, what is cessation of suffering? In whom deceit dwells not nor yet conceit. Greedless, unneeding, and unhankering. With anger quenched, extinguished in himself. He is a divine, he is a monk, a bhikkhu. And there are these two kinds of deliverance. Heart deliverance due to fading of lust and understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance. This is cessation. 41. D. Herein, what is the path? This is the only path, no other. For the purification of seeing. The noble eight-factored path. It is the bewilderment of Mra. And Bhikkhus, there are these 7 enlightenment factors. This is the path. 4 truths, shared. 42. ABCD. Herein, what are the 4 noble truths? Ideas that draw their being from a cause. Their cause a perfect one has told. And their cessation too. Such is the great monk's doctrine. Now here, the ideas that draw their being from a cause, are a. Suffering. The cause is b. Origin, the blessed one's statement, d. The path. And that statement is also c. Cessation. And whoever they are that abide contemplating gratification in ideas provocative of fetters, their craving as defilement increases, with craving as condition assuming. That is how there is an arising to this whole category of suffering. Herein, any fetter is be origin, any ideas provocative of fetters, and any sorrow and lamentation, pain, grief and despair are a. Suffering, any contemplation of a disappointment, in ideas provocative of fetters is d. The path, that he is freed from birth, from aging, from sickness, from deaths, from sorrows, from lamentations, down to, from despairs, is c. Extinction. These are the 4 truths. 43. Herein, what is the extinction element without trace left? Of one who has gone out there is no equal. That whereby one might word him there is not. With all ideas obliteratedness. Obliterated too are ways of wording. And the Gottika Sayuta in the Sayuta. These are the unshared threads. 44. Wherever the truths are demonstrated, there the meaning can, by finding the way of entry from the truth characteristic, be sought from the phrases of ungorged measure, doing so by means of phrasing that has parallel occurrence with it conforms to, the meaning and again by means of meaning that has parallel occurrence with it conforms to, the phrasing there, while the phrasings of each truth are of ungorged measure. The 4 noble truths can nevertheless be demonstrated by threads according as they are presented. 45. Verse should be assessed by verses included in the 5 collections, and prose exposition by prose expositions. 46. These are the unshared threads. Here is a mnemonic verse for them. 47. Right from the first day a man. 8 reappearances by taking. The 5 kinds of forewarning signs. The fishes in their pond used up. And therefore whence, O king, thyself? There are 3 kinds of ailing gods. Just as the pots of clay the potter. Just as the Nadakapana Sutta. He sorrows here, sorrows hereafter. And there are 3 kinds of misconduct. Those who want many sense desires. And the 3 kinds of failure, too. Stakes of steel even 100. And then the fever vast to cross. And at the mercy of his thoughts. And likewise those that cause regret. Just as the goldsmith's furnace burns. And the 3 fires that are displayed. The rust stain that grows out of iron. Misrepresenting perfect ones. Gods are instructed in 3 ways. And like a meeting in a dream. And Mras daughters 3 as well. Pierced by a barb he is deformed. The eye, the ear, the nose besides. 5 categories are displayed. Short is this life indeed one dies. My Lady Malik has died. All creatures will most surely die. Which is decease and reappearance. They muchly cling to sense desires. And then with the 4 taints as well. In whom deceit dwells not at all. And 2 sorts of deliverance. This is the only path, no other. Enlightenment factors well taught. Ideas whose being has a cause. And those who fetters contemplate. Of one gone out there is no equal. Gottika has attained extinction. These are the 10 mnemonic verses for them. 2. Miscellaneous truths, shared. 48. Herein, there are also these shared threads, in which threads truths shared forwards and backwards, and in mixed fashion are taught. 49. AB Herein, the beginning is this. By ignorance is the world shut in. 'Tis undisplayed through miswishing and neglect. And hankering smears it, I say. Suffering is its greatest fear. Herein, the ignorance and miswishing are the origin, the greatest fear is a suffering. These are the two truths of suffering and origin. And the prose exposition in the Citta Sayutta in the Sayutta, namely fetter and ideas provocative of fetters. Herein, the fetter is the origin and the ideas provocative of fetters are a suffering. These are the two truths of suffering and origin. 50. AC Herein, what is suffering and cessation? When a bhikkhu's craving for being is severed and his guide leash cut. Exhausted is his round of births. His being now is unrenewed. Herein, the cognizance is a suffering, the severance of craving for being is cessation, of which the words exhausted is his round of births, his being now is unrenewed, are the demonstration. And bhikkhus, there are these two kinds of deliverance, heart deliverance due to fading of lust and understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance. The cognizance here is a suffering, and the deliverance is cessation. These are the two truths of suffering and cessation. 51. AD Herein, what is suffering and path? Seeing the body as frail as 'twere a jar. Fortifying the heart as 'twere the town. Fight MIA with the sword of understanding. While holding what is one, be unattached. Herein, the body in the figure of a jar and the heart in the figure of the town are a suffering. The injunction to fight MIA with the sword of understanding is the path. These are two truths. And bhikkhus, what is not yours should be abandoned. The abandoning is the path, and the ideas pertaining to self that are to be abandoned, namely form down to consciousness, are a suffering. This is suffering and the path. 52. ABC Herein, what is suffering and origin and cessation? Whatever sorrows, lamentations, pain of many kinds are found here in the world. That they exist is owed to something dear. With naught held dear they never come to be. The sorrows, lamentations and pain of many kinds owed to love are a suffering. The love is the origin. The outguiding of will and lust therefore, and their nullification is cessation. These are three truths. And the wanderer Timburuka has recourse to the two extremes, namely that pleasure and pain are made by oneself, or made by another. What this inquiry is about is a suffering. And the reply, namely without adopting these two extremes, there is a middle way, with ignorance as condition, determinations, down to, with birth as condition, aging and death. This is a suffering too, and it is the origin, for the consciousness, name and form, 6 bases, contact, feeling, being, birth, and aging and death there are a suffering, while the ignorance, determinations, craving, and assuming there are b origin, so this is the made by oneself that is being inquired about, and so what independent arising is not a suffering is demonstrated as b origin. With cessation of ignorance, cessation of determinations, down to cessation of aging and death, is cessation. These are the three truths of suffering, origin, and cessation. 53. ABD Herein, what is suffering and origin and path? How could a man to sense desires stoop? Who has seen pain and that wherefrom it sources? Who knows they make for needing in the world? Should mindful train in guiding them away? Who has seen pain, this is a suffering. That wherefrom it comes to be is b origin. The seeing whence it comes to be down to, should train in guiding it away, is d the path. This is three truths. And the thread in the cattle herd simile, in the 11s of the Anguttara. Herein, any state of a perceiver of form, and the sixfold base, and how he covers up wounds, and the watering place, and how he attains the rare happiness and gladness associated with the true idea, and the fourfold basis of selfhood. These are a suffering. In so far as he is not a picker out of grubs, this is b origin. The state of a perceiver of form, the picking out of grubs, the covering up of wounds, the knowledge of the road, and the skill in pastures, these are d the path. The remaining ideas are presence causes, presence condition, presence supports, since the state of a milker who leaves some for the calf, and the extra offerings are ideas that are conditions for good friendship, while the knowledge of the road, as the eight-factored path, is the cause for attaining extinction. This is three truths. 54. ADC herein, what is suffering and path and cessation? Mindfulness turned to the body being established. A bhikkhu, when restrained in the six bases, for contact, and when always concentrated, can come to know extinction in himself. Herein, there is the mindfulness occupied with the body, and the sixfold base wherein all are a suffering. The mindfulness occupied with the body and the restraint consisting in virtue, and the concentration there whereon the mindfulness isn't established, these are the understanding category, and that in the virtue category, and the concentration category, are d the path. The extinction knowable by one who abides thus is c cessation. This is three truths. And two ideas should be kept in being by one established in virtue, they are quiet and insight. Herein, the ideas conascent with cognizance are a suffering. The quiet and the insight are d the path. The heart deliverance due to fading of lust and the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance are c cessation. This is three truths. 55. BC herein, what is origin and cessation? Yearning, longing, expectant relishing. Enticements on the several elements based. Hankering, whose being is rooted in unknowing. To all that with its root I put an end. Whose being is rooted in unknowing, with what precedes it is b origin. To all that with its root I put an end is c cessation. This is two truths. And it is through not discovering, not penetrating, for ideas, can be quoted in detail with respect to the noble one's virtue, concentration, understanding, and deliverance. Herein, the non-discovery, non-penetration, of these four ideas is b origin. The penetration of the guide to being is c cessation. 56. BD herein, what is origin and path? Whatever streams are in the world, they are shut off by mindfulness. The stream's restraint I tell, whereby they can be sealed, is understanding. Whatever streams is b origin. The understanding and the mindfulness, as shutting off and sealing are d the path. This is two truths. And the Sansataniya Sutta, Dahanimi, firm hub, the wheel right demonstrated by the 6 months, for making one pair of chariot wheels in. Herein, the bodily action with crookedness, with flaws, with faults, the having crookedness, having flaws, having faults, are b origin, and likewise with the verbal action and mental action. Then there is the uncrooked, flawless, faultless, the uncrookedness, the flawlessness, the faultlessness, are d the path. These are the two truths of origin and path. 57. BCD herein, what is origin and cessation and path? The supported is liable to dislodgement. The unsupported is not liable to dislodgement. When there is no liability to dislodgement, there is tranquility. When there is tranquility, there is no bent for naming. When there is no bent for naming, there is no coming and going. When there is no coming and going, there is no decease and reappearance. When there is no decease and reappearance, there is no here or beyond or in between. This is the end of suffering. Herein, the two kinds of support, namely craving and ignorance, are b origin. The no support and no bent for naming are d the path. The no coming and going, no decease and reappearance, and this is the end of suffering, are c cessation. These are three truths. And when there is non-remorse, etc., down to. The stipulate for knowing and seeing of deliverance is lacking, namely the 11 general supports for the deliverances with lack of stipulate. This is B origin. And then the provision of the stipulate, namely, when there is non-remorse, then for him who is provided with non-remorse, knowing and seeing of deliverance is provided with the stipulate, then this stipulate is D the path, and any deliverance is C cessation. These are the three truths of origin, cessation, and path. 58. CD herein, what is cessation and path? By the truth of his own making. Gone of himself by that to extinction, crossed beyond doubt. Knowing non-being in the world meanwhile. With renewal of being exhausted, such as a bhikkhu. By the truth is D the path. With renewal of being exhausted is C cessation. These are two truths. And 5 bases for deliverance. Either the Master taught the true idea, or some learned companion in the divine life, can be quoted in detail. When gladness is produced in him who experiences the meaning and happiness is produced in him who is gladdened, down to, becoming dispassionate, his lust fades away, this D is the path. The deliverance is C cessation. So the rest of the 5 bases for deliverance in detail. These are the 2 truths of cessation and path. These are the shared threads. 59. After finding the way of entry as to the penetration of them, and as to the characteristic of each, by means of these shared threads according as they are presented in the threads cited, other threads can be demonstrated provided one does not misapply them. 60. Verse should be assessed by verses, prose exposition by prose expositions. 61. And these shared threads given above, namely the 6 dyads and 4 triads, are 10 of the possible 12 augmentations. This is the miscellaneous demonstration. Then there are also A, the one shared tetrad demonstration, and B, the one standing for an all-inclusive demonstration, as one part representing any of the 5 mentioned above, namely the 4 triads and 1 tetrad with the 6 dyads too. These 2 augmentations, and the previous 10, make up the 12 truth augmentations. 62. Up to this point, however, there has been actually no all-inclusive thread quoted by one who is diligent that, either prose exposition or verse, can after searching be demonstrated without using the way of entry by these 12 augmentations. Here is a brief demonstration. 63. A. All suffering meets together under 7 terms. What 7? All suffering can be demonstrated by the following terms. 1. Association with the loathed, and 2. Dissociation from the loved, for that the 2 supports are the body and cognizance, hence it is called 3. Bodily suffering, and 4. Mental suffering. And there's no suffering of pain, that is neither bodily nor mental, so all suffering can be demonstrated by the 2 terms bodily and mental. It is also comprised by 5. Painfulness as pain, 6. Painfulness in determinations, and 7. Painfulness in change. So this suffering is all comprised also by these 3 terms. Accordingly this threefold suffering, and the twofold suffering as bodily and mental, and the twofold suffering as association with the loathed and dissociation from the loved make up the sevenfold suffering. 64. B. Herein all origin is threefold, without fourth, without fifth. How threefold? Craving, view, and action. 65. Herein, while craving is the origin of being, it is action that is the origin of the inferiority or superiority of one thus generated. So any inferiority and superiority in the various kinds of being existence and destinations is comprised by the 3 kinds of painfulness, and also the body with its consciousness, belonging to one shut in by ignorance and fettered by craving for being, which body having been procured owing to the 2 roots in craving and ignorance, is comprised by the 3 painfulnesses too. 66. Likewise, view can be arrived at from perversion. That can be demonstrated as sevenfold. The single perverting is demonstrated as it occurring through the 3 things perverted, and having 4 objects of perversion. Herein, what is the single perverting? It is distorted apprehension, way of entry by rejection of the fact, such that it apprehends distortedly that there is permanence in the impermanent, and so with the rest of the four perversions. While this perverting is one, what is perverted is perception, cognizance, and view. What are the four objects of perversion? They are the body, feeling, cognizance, and ideas. 67. When someone goes by the perversions, thus his unprofitable cognizance increases. Herein, the perversion of perception increases the unprofitable root hate, the perversion of cognizance increases the unprofitable root greed, and the perversion of view increases the unprofitable root delusion. 68. Herein, the fruit of the unprofitable root hate is the three wrongnesses, namely wrong speech, wrong action, and wrong livelihood. The fruit of the unprofitable root greed is the three wrongnesses, namely wrong intention, wrong effort, and wrong concentration. The fruit of the unprofitable root delusion is the two wrongnesses, namely wrong view and wrong mindfulness. 69. Thus this unprofitable cognizance has cause and has condition. The perversions are the condition and the unprofitable roots are the cause. 70. And these same perversion and root in their opposite, neither less nor more, can be demonstrated as the two conditions in the case of C. Cessation, and in the case of D. The path, but the conditions are four as well by assuming perversion in the opposite. 71. Here is a mnemonic verse. By ignorance is the world shut in, and fetters in the sitter thread. His craving for being has been severed. There are these two deliverances. The body as a fragile pot. What is not yours should be abandoned. Whatever sorrows, lamentations, timbaruka and one's own making. Sight of suffering arisen. Then the cow heard simile. With body mindfulness, he said. And quiet and insight then as well. Hankering, longing, expectant relish. With non-discovery of four. Whatever streams are in the world. And Dahanimi the wheelwright. Dislodgeable is one supported. And when there is no non-remorse. By the truth of his own making. And basis for deliverance. In the Piaka disclosure pronounced by Markakena, this is the first chapter called, The Display of the Noble Truths. The Piaka Disclosure. 2. The Pattern of the Dispensation. I. Schedules. First grouping. 72. Herein, what is the pattern of the dispensation? Type of thread dealing with corruption. Type of thread dealing with morality. Type of thread dealing with penetration. Type of thread dealing with the adept. Type of thread dealing with corruption and morality. Type of thread dealing with corruption and penetration. Type of thread dealing with corruption, penetration, and adept. Type of thread dealing with morality and penetration. Second grouping. Injunction. Fruit. Means. Injunction and fruit. Injunction and means, missing, comma. Fruit and means. Injunction, fruit, and means. Gratification. Disappointment. Escape. Gratification and disappointment. Gratification and escape. Disappointment and escape. Gratification, disappointment, and escape. Third grouping. Belonging to worlds. Dissociated from worlds. Belonging to worlds and dissociated from worlds. Action. Ripening. Action and ripening. Demonstrated. Undemonstrated. Demonstrated and undemonstrated. Knowledge. The knowable. Knowledge and the knowable. Seeing. Keeping in being. Seeing and keeping in being. Inseparable from the idea of ripening. Not inseparable from the idea of ripening. Neither inseparable from the idea of ripening nor not inseparable from the idea of ripening. Our own statement. Someone else's statement. Our own statement and someone else's statement. Expressed in terms of creatures. Expressed in terms of ideas. Expressed in terms of creatures and in terms of ideas. Eulogy. Expressed in terms of our own statement. Expressed in terms of someone else's statement. Expressed in terms of our own statement and in terms of someone else's statement. The to be done. The fruit. To be done and the fruit. The agreed. The refused. The agreed and refused. These six, that is, numbers 51 to 56, are refused, do not count. 2. Illustrative quotations. First grouping. 73, 1. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with corruption? Caught in the net of sensual murk. And blocked by craving's bondage. Fenced in by fences of neglect. Like fishes in a funnel trap. They follow after aging and death. Just as a sucking calf its mother. And a bickus, there are these 5 hindrances. 74, 2. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with morality? Ideas are heralded by mind. Mind heads them and they are mind-made. If someone with a placid mind is wont to speak or act, then bliss sure follows after him, as does his shadow keep him company. And the thread in the Sayuta, in which the Blessed One taught to Mahatma the Sakyan in the Sakyan's city of Kapilavatthu with guiding detail, how that cognizance of his at the time of his death, at the last moment, would be fortified by faith and virtue and fortified by learning, generosity, and understanding. 75, 3. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with penetration? Above, below, in every way without lust. And seeing not at all that I am this. Thus liberated, he has crossed the flood. Not crossed before, for non-renewal of being. And Nanda asks the Master, the kinds of virtue, what is their aim? 76, 4. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with the adept? Whose cognizance is steady as a rock. And never can be made to shudder. Is free from lust for lust-provoking things. Untroubled too by troubling things. Whose cognizance is kept in being like this. How shall suffering come to him? And a Shriputta and the Blessed One, howled a certain elder said, he has insulted me and is going wandering without having apologized, and Shriputta's exposition can be quoted, namely, Blessed One, surely it is he whose mindfulness of the body is not kept in being, not made much of. 77, 5. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with corruption and dealing with morality? Rain soddens what is covered up. But what is open it soddens not. So open out what is covered up. That rain may never sodden you. Rain soddens what is covered up is corruption. But what is open it soddens not is morality. And a dark with a dark supreme value, herein, dark, and with a dark supreme value are corruption, bright, and with a bright supreme value are morality. 78, 6. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with corruption and dealing with penetration? The steadfast will never call that a strong bond, made of iron or consisting of wood or of thongs. But greed flushed with lusting for jewels and gems, and concern for a wife and for children as well. The steadfast will never call that a strong bond, down to, and concern for a wife and for children as well is corruption, but that too they sever and wander in freedom, unconcerned and all sensual desires foregone, is penetration. And what is chosen, and what is asserted, and a name and forms finding a footing with these 4 terms, corruption, with the 4. In the negative paragraph, penetration. 79, 7. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with corruption, dealing with penetration, and dealing with the adept? Verse example happy smiley. This world is born to anguish and subject to painful contact. It is sickness that it calls self. For however it conceives it, 'Tis ever otherwise than that. Maintaining its being other than that. The world clings to being, expectantly relishing only being. But what it relishes brings fear. And what it fears is pain. Now this divine life under the Blessed One is lived in order to abandon being. Whoever have declared escape from being to come about, through love of non-being, none of them, I say, escape from being. Whoever have declared liberation from being to come about, through love of some kind of being, none of them, I say, are liberated from being. It is by depending on the essentials of existence that this suffering has actual being, with exhaustion of assuming in all ways suffering has no actual being. See this wide world subjected to ignorance. Which delights to be, never freed from being. Yet, whatever the kinds of being that occur in any way, anywhere. All these are determinations impermanent, pain-haunted, inseparable from the idea of change. So when a man thus sees, with right understanding how it is, craving for being is abandoned, he no more expectantly relishes non-being. That is the utter exhaustion of all craving. That is the remainderless fading, cessation, that is extinction. That bhikkhu being quenched through not assuming. His being comes no more to a renewal. Transcended is death's being, the battle won. One such as this outstrips all modes of being. Now as to the words, this world is born to anguish, down to. And what it fears is pain, is corruption by craving. The passage whoever have declared escape from being to come about, through love of non-being, none of them, I say, escapes from being. Whoever have declared liberation from being to come about, through love of some kind of being, none of them, I say, is liberated from being is corruption by view. That corruption by view and corruption by craving are both corruption. Then to go back again, the words now this divine life under the Blessed One is lived in order to abandon being, down to. With exhaustion of assuming in all ways suffering, has no actual being are penetration. The words that bhikkhu being quenched, down to. One such as this outstrips all modes of being deal with the adept. Prose example happy smiley, 4 kinds of persons, I, one who goes with the stream is corruption, 2, one who has steadied himself, and 3, one who goes against the stream are penetration, and 4, one who stands a firm ground is the adept's plane. 88. Herein, what is the type of thread dealing with morality and dealing with penetration? Merit will grow for one who gives. No risk is stored for one restrained. One who is skilled abandons evil. With exhaustion of lust, hate, delusion, he attains complete extinction. Here merit will grow for one who gives, no risk is stored for one restrained is morality. One who is skilled abandons evil, with exhaustion of lust, hate, delusion, he attains complete extinction is penetration. And of 5 rewards can be expected when ideas that have entered the ear are consolidated by word of mouth, looked over by the mind, and well penetrated by right view. Here someone has heard many ideas, remembered and not forgotten them, consolidated them by word of mouth, looked over them with the mind, penetrated them well by right view, then when he devotes himself, strives and makes efforts, he reaches distinction here and now, too, and if he reaches no distinction here and now, he reaches it when ill, 3, and if he reaches none when ill, he reaches it on the occasion of his time of dying, 4, and if he reaches none on the occasion of his time of dying, he reaches it when a god, v. And if he reaches none when a god, then through lust for the true idea he reaches hermit enlightenment. Herein, he reaches, here and now is penetration. That he reaches hermit enlightenment in a future existence is morality. 81. These are 8 of the 16 types of thread completely encompassing all the dispensation. The ninefold thread is analyzed into these 16 thread types. And this ninefold thread is for one with understanding, not for one without understanding, for one devoted, not for one undevoted. Discussion. 1. Corruption, 3 kinds. 82. Normally in the world corruption haunts, even one who abides without action. That corruption is threefold as corruption by craving, 2. corruption by view, and 3. corruption by misconduct. Now, when he comes to stand out above 3, that last named type of corruption, then corruption establishes itself in the ideas that he heard, and it establishes itself in ideas belonging to the worlds, since he is unskilled as to what is seen there. If he misapprehends that virtue, owed to his climbing out of corruption by misconduct, and that view, then he has corruption by craving. But if it occurs to him thus, by means of this virtue or duty, or divine life I shall be some god or other, then he has wrong view, and that is 2, his corruption by wrong view. 2. Morality. 83. But if he is established in virtue and his virtue and duty is not misapprehended, then he being virtuous, that virtue and duty of his, being taken in a reasoned manner, generates non-remorse, down to knowing and seeing of deliverance. And that good conduct thus conduces to his morality, that is, to his moral progress, either here and now or on the occasion of his completing his time, or in other categories in some future existence. That is why this is called the type of thread dealing with morality. 3. Penetration. 84. Herein, when, being steadied in the virtues, his cognizance is without hindrances, then the Blessed One teaches him that true idea for the abandoning of the embodiment view. 85. Finally, he reaches the supreme goal, extinction. He reaches the supreme extinction either with intervals between sessions, or else in a single session, he reaches all the 6 acquaintanceships. 86. Herein, those persons who first reach extinction in the Noble One's true idea are of 2 kinds, the follower by faith and the follower by ideas. Herein, the follower by ideas is one who gains knowledge from a condensed statement, while the follower by faith is guidable. Herein, one who gains knowledge from a condensed statement is of 2 kinds, one may have keen faculties, and another blunt faculties. And herein, one who is guidable is of 2 kinds, one may have keen faculties, and another blunt faculties. 87. Herein, the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement with blunt faculties and the guidable type with keen faculties, when classed as above under the 2 types, are unequal in their faculties. But when they are subtracted respectively from the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement and from the guidable type, they, being then regardable as equal in their faculties, constitute a 3rd type, namely the one who gains knowledge from an expanded statement. These are thus the 3-person types, without 4th and without 5th, the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement, the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement, and the guidable type. 88. Herein, the person of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement, whether of the faculties he obtains are blunt or keen, when, being steadied on the plane of seeing, he reaches the fruit of stream entry. He is a single seed, the first type of stream enterer. Herein, the person of the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement, whether of the faculties he obtains are blunt or keen, when, being steadied on the plane of seeing, he reaches the fruit of stream entry. He is a clan to clan, the second type of stream enterer. Herein, the person of the guidable type, whether of the faculties he obtains are blunt or keen, when, being steadied on the plane of seeing, he reaches the fruit of stream entry. He is a 7 times at most, the third type of stream enterer. Now these 3 types of persons are steadied in the fruit of stream entry with diversity in their faculties, and it is with diversity of faculties in each case, that the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement is a single germ, the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement is a clan to clan, and the guidable type is a 7 at most. This is the type of thread dealing with penetration. 4. The adept. 89. Now it is if someone makes efforts additional to that he reaches the supreme goal, extinction. 90. Herein, the keen-facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement becomes 2-person types on reaching the non-return fruit. There is he who attains extinction early in his next existence, and he who attains extinction late there. Herein, the keen-facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement becomes 2-person types on reaching the non-return fruit. There is he who attains extinction without prompting determinations, and he who attains extinction with prompting determinations. Herein, the person of guidable type, on reaching the non-return fruit, is an upstream abound for the not junior gods. 91. But by taking account of difference in their faculties in the cases of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement, and the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement, then the keen facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement is one who attains extinction early, while the blunt facultied one of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement is one who attains extinction late. Then, the keen facultied one of the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement is one who attains extinction without prompting determinations, while the blunt facultied one of the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement is one who attains extinction with prompting determinations. The guidable type is the upstreamer bound for the not junior gods. 92. So the 5 kinds of non-returner, the once returner as 6th, and the 3 kinds of stream enterer, make up 9 kinds of initiate. 93. Herein, the keen facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement becomes 2-person types on reaching arahantship, the both ways liberated and the liberated by understanding. Herein, the blunt facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from a condensed statement becomes 2-person types on reaching arahantship, the eon delayer and the essence of penetration. Herein, the keen facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement becomes 2-person types on reaching arahantship, the able by choice and the able by guarding. Herein, the blunt facultied person of the type gaining knowledge from an expanded statement becomes 2-person types on reaching arahantship, the no extinction attainer, if he chooses extinction attainer, if he does not choose, and the no extinction attainer, if he guards extinction attainer, if he does not guard. Herein, the person of guidable type, who is not devoted to the pursuit of development, is one liable to fall away, or else owing to his being one certain in action, he becomes a level head. 94. These are 9 types of arahants. 95. This is the fourfold thread, namely that dealing with corruption, that dealing with the adept. The 10 powers of a perfect one. 96. Now a perfect one has a tenfold power that occurs with regard to these person types. How tenfold? Here when the enlightened ones, the blessed ones, have not yet set rolling the wheel of the true idea, God's sons of great influence issue forth, to implore them thus, let the sublime one teach the true idea. And he, the newly enlightened one, on surveying the world with the unsurpassed enlightened one's eye, sees 3 classes of creatures, the certain of rightness, the certain of wrongness, and the not certain. 1. Knowledge of instance and non-instance. 97. Herein, that the certain of rightness class might enter into wrong mindfulness, no such instance is found. That it might attain extinction without a teacher, no such instance is found. That it might enter upon an attainment of concentration, such an instance is found. 98. Herein, that the certain of wrongness class will practice noble right practice, no such instance is found. That it will practice ignoble wrong practice, such an instance is found. Herein, 1. That the not certain class, when rightly practicing, will go to the certain of rightness class, such an instance is found. 2. That, when wrongly practicing, it will go to the certain of rightness class, no such instance is found. 3. That, when rightly practicing, it will go to the certain of wrongness class, no such instance is found. 4. That, when wrongly practicing, it will go to the certain of wrongness class, such an instance is found. 99. A. That anyone will in accordance with a true idea accuse me thus you, a fully enlightened one, who are surveying these 3 classes, with the unsurpassed enlightened one's eye, have not discovered these ideas, no such instance is found. 100. B. That anyone will in accordance with a true idea accuse me, claiming, as I do, to be without lust, of having taints still unexhausted, no such instance is found. 101. C. That after the teaching of the true idea, to this not certain class it will not be seen, to conduce, to the complete exhaustion of suffering in him who gives it effect, no such instance is found. 102. D. That a hearer of mine belonging to the not certain class, being thus advised, will not verify any progressive distinction, no such instance is found. 103. 2. That whoever of the many kinds of gods, naga serpents or spirits with their many languages a stilled one tames in those languages, will go to a further shore other than the further shore stated by the definition of ideas in the language of the texts. No such instance is found. The discrimination of ideas. 104. 3. That distilled one should not master those languages uttered by creatures, as their language. No such instance is found. The discrimination of language. 105. 1. That such a language, so used by him, should not intimate that meaning to those hearers who delight in the path that is not uneven, unrighteous. No such instance is found. The discrimination of meanings. 106. 4. That when influential God's sons approach and ask a stilled one questions, the meaning might not be perspicuous to him because of his being bodily or mentally oppressed, or because of his being embarrassed through palsy of a hand or lameness of a foot. No such instance is found. The discrimination of perspicuity. 107. That wherein quieting of these is, therein non-quieting of these is. No such instance is found. That wherein destruction of these is not, therein destruction of these will be. No such instance is found. And as for origin, so for cessation. 108. The 10 unprofitable and profitable courses of action. 109. That womankind will be MRA or Saka, ruler of gods, or a high divinity, or a perfect one, or a wheel-turner monarch. No such instance is found. That a male may be a wheel-turner or Saka, ruler of gods. Such an instance is found. 110. So such power, such knowledge, as this is called the knowledge of instance and no instance, the first power of a perfect one. 111. That can be demonstrated by the 3 classes, the 4 intrepidities, the 4 discriminations, dependent arising in its occurrence and standstill, and what happens in unprofitable and profitable ripening, and for the female and the male on reappearance. A perfect one knows this power thus. 2. Knowledge of the way that leads anywhere. 112. Now as to the certain of rightness class out of those 3 classes, which were mentioned above, this is not the way that leads anywhere, this is the way that leads only to extinction. Likewise also the certain of wrongness class, which is not the way that leads anywhere, this is only the way leading to origin of embodiment. It is this and not certain class, which, when steadied in a way going here or there, goes to extinction, goes to the state of unease, and goes to the divine and human states, or may go anywhere according to whatever way it may practice. This is the way that leads anywhere. 113. Knowledge of how it is herein, is called knowledge of the way that leads anywhere, the second power of a perfect one. 3. Knowledge of difference of belief. 114. Now this way that leads anywhere, is followed by those of differing beliefs. Some believe in sensual desires, and some in performance of difficult feats. Some are devoted to self-torment, some rely on a belief in purity through the roundabout of rebirths, some believe in ineffectuality of action. 115. Knowledge of how creatures come to be bound down by the habit of this or that kind of temperament understands how the world's varied field of beliefs comes to be. 116. This is the third power of a perfect one. 4. Knowledge of the different elements. 117. Herein, when creatures are of such a belief, that belief of theirs they repeat, keep in being and make much of. When they repeat it thus, believing in it, that element sustains them. What is that? It is the sensual desire element, the renunciation element, the ill will element, the non-ill will element, the cruelty element and the non-cruelty element that are believed in. Any other element beyond, namely the undetermined element beyond the determined element, they do not see, obstinately misapprehending and insisting upon that alone, they assert only this is the true, the other is wrong, as was said by the Blessed One to Saka, ruler of gods. 118. Knowledge of how it is herein, is called the fourth power of a perfect one. 5. Knowledge of ripening of action. 119. Herein, whatever element they believe best, that they instigate through the body and through speech. The instigation is mental choice, while the choice as action is bodily and verbal. Because of the mentalness of the instigation, a perfect one understands the action sequence thus by this creature, who has such elements, such action was done, that being in the past period, with this as cause, such ripening of it is ripening now, or will ripen in the future period. He understands the presently arisen period. Thus this person, who has such elements, is doing this action through craving and view, with this as cause. Its ripening will be generated not only here and now but also either on the next reappearance, or in some future state. He understands the future period. Thus this person will do such action, with this as cause such ripening of it will be generated. There are 4 undertakings of action. This kind of undertaking of action has presently arisen pleasure and ripens as pleasure in the future, 2, etc. 120. So he understands this past, future, and presently arisen undertaking of action as to cause and as to instance, and the variety in its ripening, and the highness and lowness, the inferiority and superiority of creatures. This is called the knowledge of ripening of action, the 5th power of a perfect one. 6. Knowledge of corruption, etc., in the cases of the meditations, etc. 121. Herein, whatever undertaking of action creatures are undertaking, therein he understands. Thus, when a person is a believer in efficacy of action, and of lusting temperament, his cognizance comes to fulfillment by means of the renunciation element. When he is occupied with the field of lust, his first meditation is corrupted, but if he again makes further efforts, then he is pursuing the way dealing with distinction, but doing so on the mental level whose field of cleansing is the first meditation, for his meditation is then still only of the kind dealing with loss. Once steadied in the first meditation, then the second meditation comes to be his cleansing. And then, when he desires to enter upon the third meditation, the joy faculty invades his cognizance and remains steady. That happiness of his remains steady, indicating the third meditation, but not as dealing with distinction. If he understands how the escape is in its case, then in the same way the fourth meditation comes to be the cleansing too. Now there are the ideas, namely, the factors of the third meditation that deal with the loss of the fourth meditation, and where these ideas are produced it is by the surmounting of them that the fourth meditation is indicated as the cleansing. Similarly the formless attainments, the 4 concentrations, the 3 gateways to liberation, and the 8 liberations. Meditations, the 4 meditations. Liberations, the 8 liberations and the 3 gateways to liberation. Concentration, the 4 kinds of concentration, namely concentration through will, concentration through energy, concentration through cognizance, and concentration through inquiry. Attainments, the 4 formless attainments. So when a person is of lusting temperament, such is the corruption of his meditations, liberations, concentrations, and attainments. Likewise for one of hating temperament, and for one of deluded temperament. And when a person is of lusting temperament, such is his cleansing. 122. So knowledge of how it is herein, which is not shared by disciples, is called the 6th power of a perfect one. 7. Knowledge of the disposition of creatures' faculties. 123. Herein, a perfect one understands. Thus, ideas belonging to worlds and ideas dissociated from worlds acquire the name faculty, when dealing with keeping in being independence upon the plane of respective predominance. They acquire the name power independence upon the mind faculty as confirmed mind faculty. They acquire the name energy independence upon the element of instigation. So such being his knowledge, he also made the teaching of the true idea. Thus these persons are possessed of these ideas, according to the mood and according to the constituent of the leaning and inclination in the beliefs they possess. 124. This is called knowledge of variety in the faculties, powers, and energy, of other creatures, other persons, the 7th power of a perfect one. 8. The recollection of past life. 9. The heavenly eye. 125. Herein, by means of 2 powers a perfect one understands the destination, in the planes and the worlds, etc., of those who have fetters and of those who are initiates, understanding it in the past roundabout by means of the recollection of past life, and understanding their decease and reappearance now in this presently arisen roundabout by means of the heavenly eye. Thus these 2 powers are directed to the heavenly eye. That which was the heavenly eye's province in the past period becomes mindfulness's province now. 126. So there is knowledge of his own past life in various ways and different aspects, and of others in the present period by means of the heavenly I. These are two powers of a perfect one, past life the eighth and the heavenly I the ninth. 10. Knowledge of exhaustion of taints. 127. Again, a perfect one understands the meditation of noble persons to be a cleansing and dealing with penetration. Thus, this person, having by means of this path, by means of this way, here and now verified and entered upon the heart deliverance and understanding deliverance that are taintless through exhaustion of taints, abides therein. Such is the knowledge about the exhaustion of his own taints and the appropriate foreplane in knowledge of those coefficient with view exhausted by the stream entered down to that of those exhausted on the plane of the 9 kinds of arahants. The exhaustion of taints occurring limitedly for initiates and unlimitedly for arahants. Herein, heart deliverance is taintless with respect to 2 taints, namely the taint of sensual desire and the taint of being, while understanding deliverance is taintless with respect to 2 taints, namely the taint of views and the taint of ignorance. 128. The knowledge of these 2 deliverances, how they come to be, is called knowledge of exhaustion of taints, the 10th power of a perfect one. The 4 types of thread as 5 types. 129. Steaded in these 10 powers, a perfect one teaches the dispensation in 5 types of teaching, thus, 1. That dealing with corruption, 2. That dealing with morality, 3a. That dealing with seeing, 3b. That dealing with keeping in being, and 4. That dealing with the adept. 1. Corruption. 130. Herein, non-greed is the escape from corruption by craving, non-delusion is the escape from corruption by view, and the 3 profitable roots together are the escape from corruption by misconduct. Why? Because there are these 3 kinds of mental misconduct, namely I. Covetousness, 2. Ill will, and 3. Wrong view. 131. Herein, I. Covetousness, as mental misconduct assists the bodily action consisting in taking what is not given, and it aids all the speech action anchored thereto, namely false speech, all speech that denies reality, and what is, all contempt and domineering. And it aids covetousness, as a root of unprofit. In the case of them corresponding the good conduct is the choice of abstention from the false speech, from the taking what is not given, and from the covetousness. 132. Herein, 2. Ill will as mental misconduct aids the bodily action consisting in killing breathing things, and it aids all that verbal action consisting in refuting by dragging to and dragging fro and jolting up, and malicious speech, and harsh speech. 133. 3. Wrong view as mental misconduct gives purpose to wrong view, covetousness and ill will, and in one who has any wrong view at all, his misconduct, whether born of lust or born of hate, is all given being by wrong view. It is for this reason that wrong view aids misconduct in sensual desires. The speech action it aids is gossip. 134. These are the 3 kinds of misconduct. As to the unprofitable roots, the covetousness is greed, the ill will is hate, and the wrong view is delusion. These aid the 8 wrongnesses. It is when these 3 unprofitable roots are curbed that the 10-fold profitable comes to fulfillment. From that 3-fold corruption by misconduct the type of thread dealing with morality is the escape. 135. Herein, this demonstration is based on the plurality of covetousness, ill will, and wrong view, and it is in order for the greed, hate, and delusion also to correspond, that greed has prominence, pride of place, here for that reason, or else greed has it because it is normally so described among those 3 ideas considered as roots. 2. Morality. 136. Herein, the unprofitable root delusion is ignorance. That has insisted on form in 4 ways. One who goes by ignorance, sees form as self, or self-possessing form, or form in self, or self in form. 137. Herein, the first term in each of the 4 conjectures in the embodiment view belongs with annihilationism, in the following ways: happy smiley, the soul is what the physical frame is, the no existence of giving, etc. view, the fortuitous arising view, and the view that one acts, another experiences, the actions ripening. The last 3 terms of the self-conjectures in the embodiment view belong with eternalism, in the following way: happy smiley, the soul is one, the physical frame another, and the no causists fall under this head, because of the likelihood that the doctrine of no ought to be done will being suffering, and also the ineffectuality of actions, so, is included. 138. Herein, the live out the soul is describe 86 kinds of purification, through the roundabout misapprehending it thus happy smiley, only this is true, the other is wrong. 139. Herein, just as the embodiment view has 4 grounds in form, so it has 20 grounds in all the 5 categories. The soul is another ists belong with the eternalness of the embodiment view, and belong with the holders of the eternalist doctrine. They misapprehend virtue and duty thus, by means of this. I shall be some god or other. This is misapprehension of virtue and duty. 140. Herein, in the embodiment view, he sees form as self, and he doubts, is uncertain, disbelieves, is not confident, about whether the soul is what the physical frame is, in the future period and in the past period. This is imperfection in one steaded in matters only dealing with morality. 3a. Seeing. 141. Herein, he abandons all uncertainty by means of the faith faculty. He sees rise and subsidence by means of the understanding faculty. He gives cognizant singleness by means of the concentration faculty. He instigates by means of the energy faculty. By means of these 5 faculties, as a follower by faith he arouses the straight resulting concentration, since he is certain in the confidence that is due to undergoing, and by means of these faculties when purified, as a follower by ideas, he arouses the straight resulting concentration owed to independence of others. He understands how it is that this is suffering, and so with the other 3 truths. This is the type of thread dealing with seeing. 3b. Keeping in being. 142. Herein, of the 5 hither-side fetters, 3 fetters are abandonable by seeing, while the other 2 are altogether abandoned when done by 2-person types. 143. Herein, the 3 roots of unprofit abandonable by keeping in being, discarded in the progressively higher stages, still generate 6 kinds of being. 144. Herein, when among these 3 roots covetousness and ill will have been attenuated, and 6 kinds of being have come to grips with exhaustion, while 2 kinds of being still remain. When this covetousness and ill will are altogether exhausted and only 1 kind of being remains, that being is generated by conceit. 145. Now although here in the Arahant path, which is the last stage of the initiate, there are also the other 4 further side fetters besides conceit, namely the defilements of lust for form, lust for being, ignorance, and agitation, since these are given their being by conceit as positionality. All these 7 kinds of initiate have no power to stop the conceit, I am, and so one should instigate the abandoning of the conceit, I am. But he whose taints are exhausted, by his reaching the Arahant's fruit, is beyond this. 4. The adept. 146. While the type of thread, dealing with seeing has regard to 5 kinds of initiate persons, and the type of thread dealing with keeping in being has regard to 3 who are practicing the way, and 2 who stand in the fruit, beyond these there's the type of thread dealing with the adept, which has regard to the plane of him who has done, and this is the 5th type of thread. The ninefold thread, general. 147. This thread in general is taught of 3 types of persons, of the ordinary man, of the initiate, and of the adept. That dealing with corruption and that dealing with morality are taught of the ordinary man, that dealing with seeing and that dealing with keeping in being of the 5 kinds of initiates, and that dealing with the adept demonstrated last of all arahants. 148. Now this in thread shown above, as if 5-fold can be sought in the 27 moods, its range being among those and not beyond them. Again with abbreviation, that in thread falls into 50 moods, which 50 moods demonstrated in the dispensation, when abbreviated, fall into 10 moods, which, while remaining in the presentation of the noble truths, fall into 8 moods, that is, into the 4 unshared and 4 shared, which are the plane of the modes of conveying in combined treatment. These when abbreviated fall into the 5 types of threads, into that dealing with corruption, that dealing with morality, that dealing with seeing, that dealing with keeping in being, and that dealing with the adept. These when abbreviated fall into the 4 types of threads, into that dealing with corruption, that dealing with morality, that dealing with penetration, and that dealing with the adept. These when abbreviated fall into three types of threads, into that dealing with the ordinary man, that dealing with the initiate, and that dealing with the adept. These when abbreviated fall into two types of threads, into that dealing with penetration, and that dealing with previous devotion, according as it was said by the Blessed One. It is with two aims in view that perfect ones, arahants and fully enlightened, teach the true idea, that is thread, song, etc. The teachers do so conceiving that those possessed of previous devotion will easily attain mastery, and conceiving that the previous devotion will conduce to creatures remembering. 149. Herein, bearing in mind the idiosyncrasies of one's own understanding in regard to the eightfold thread abbreviation, the construing can be done here, and there wherever one is able. And after so construing the phrasing here and there, the thread's meaning can then be demonstrated. 150. No one can demonstrate how the thread's meaning is without having lent an ear. 151. Here is a mnemonic verse for the first threads. Caught in the net of sensual murk. And 5 in shutting hindrances. Ideas are heralded by mind. And then the Sakyan Manma. Above, below, quite without lust. What is the various virtues' aim? Whose cognizance is like a rock? The Upatissa question beginning. Whose mindfulness of body is not covered, dark supreme value. That is not strong, and what is chosen? And this world and all the rest. And the four kinds of persons too. Merit will grow for one who gives. And ideas entered by the ear. These are their mnemonic verse. Second grouping. 152, 9. Herein, what is injunction? Now if thou art afraid of pain, and pain thou findest disagreeable, then do no sort of evil act, in public or in secrecy. And rather, do not look back, to past form, can be quoted in detail. This is called injunction. 153, 10. Herein, what is fruit? The true ideal guards him that walks therein, as does a big umbrella in time of rain. The ideal's reward when walked in right is this. Who walks therein has no bad destination. And Nanda, one who is virtuous does not have to choose, how shall I have no remorse? This is fruit. 154, 11. Herein, what is means? And then besides, not self are all ideas. And so when he sees thus with understanding, he then dispassion finds in suffering. This path it is that leads to purification. And the prose exposition in the sevens, namely, when a bhikkhu possesses 7 factors, then even were Himalaya king of mountains to move, what need to speak of mere ignorance? This is means. 155, 12. Herein, what is injunction and fruit? Now if thou art afraid of pain, and pain thou findest disagreeable, then do no sort of evil act, in public or in secrecy. For if thou doest and wilt do an evil act no matter what, thou wilt no safety find from pain, even by flight to future states. The injunction is in the first verse and the fruit in the second. And 2 ideas should be kept in being by one established well in virtue. The keeping of cognizance in being and the keeping of understanding in being are the injunction, and the fading of lust is the fruit. 156, 14. Herein, what is fruit and means? When a wise man, established well in virtue, keeps cognizance in being and understanding, then as a bhikkhu ardent and sagacious, he succeeds in disentangling this tangle. The means is the first half verse and the fruit is the second half verse. And Anandya the Sakyan desirous of abiding in the town dwelt in, for the rains, by the seer the thread in the 11s. From the start down to in regard to the 6 ideas and further in regard to the 5 ideas. That which is the task to be done is the means, that his cognizance is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, and from all taints, in the good destinations, is the fruit. This is fruit and means. 157, 15. Herein, what is injunction and fruit and means? Look upon the world as void. Mogaja, constantly mindful. With self-view thus eliminated, you may outstrip mortality. Look upon the world as void, Mogaja is the injunction. Constantly mindful is the means. With self-view thus eliminated, you may outstrip mortality is the fruit. And Bhikkhus, keep concentration in being. Bhikkhus, a bhikkhu when concentrated understands form as impermanent. Seeing thus, a noble hearer is liberated from birth, etc., and despair. Here also the 3. 158, 16. Herein, what is gratification? When a mortal desires, if his desire is fulfilled. And it is with true ideal conduct, with righteous conduct, with profitable conduct, as the causes that one is divine. Thus it is that here some creatures on the dissolution of the body, reappear in a good destination, in the heavenly world. This is gratification. 159, 17. Herein, what is disappointment? If his desires elude him, he becomes as deformed as if pierced by a barb. And the simile of the mountain in the Parsonada Sutta. This is disappointment. 160, 18. Herein, what is escape? He that shuns desires, as a snake's head with his foot, and is mindful, evades this attachment to the world. And the thread in the Sutta, the Peṭakopadesa tree, with the bleached foliage, with the spear, foliage. This is escape. 161, 19. Herein, what is gratification and disappointment? Whatever actions a man does, 'tis those that he sees in himself. And good is for the doer of good, and evil for the evil doer. Herein, what the evil doer experiences is a disappointment, while what the doer of good experiences is a gratification. And the prose exposition in the octads on gain and non-gain, etc. Herein, the non-gain, non-fame, censure, and pain, there are the disappointment, while the gain, fame, praise, and pleasure, these are the gratification. 162, 20. Herein, what is gratification and escape? Merit's ripening is pleasant, and brings success to one's intent. And so one soon can reach the peace supreme that is extinction. The merit's ripening, and the success to one's intent, are the gratification, while that one can soon reach the peace supreme that is extinction, is the escape. And for a great man possessed of the 32 characteristics of a great man there are only 2 destinations. From if he lives on in the household life, he becomes a wheel-turning monarch, down to, he lives on after conquering, is gratification. If he goes forth from the household life into homelessness, is the escape from all gratification. This is gratification and escape. 163, 21. Herein, what is disappointment and escape? Knowing fear of that assuming, which gives birth and death their being. He generates no more assuming. With births and deaths complete exhaustion. In the first half verse the actual being of birth and death is the disappointment. That he generates no more assuming with births and deaths complete exhaustion, is the escape. And this world has surely happened upon woe since it is born and dies, down to, how will there be an end to this suffering? Or beyond? Here the scrutiny is the disappointment. From he goes forth knowing wants down to the ancient city, a royal capital, is the escape. This is disappointment and escape. 164, 22. Herein, what is gratification and disappointment and escape? For pleasing sense desires, many and varied, in many a different way constrain the heart. So I went forth to homelessness, O king. Best is the monk's state incontrovertible. As to the words, for pleasing sense desires, many and varied, this is gratification. As to, in many a different way constrain the heart, this is the disappointment. As to, so I went forth to homelessness, O king. Best is the monk's state incontrovertible, this is the escape. And the thread with the simile of the salt crystal according as each action one does is experienceable, so is its ripening experienceable. Herein, by action experienceable as pain, he shows disappointment, with the words, by one who has not kept the body in being down to petty-hearted. By action experienceable as pleasure he shows gratification, which is like the preceding clause. As to one who has kept cognizance in being, kept the body in being, and kept understanding in being, is great in himself, not petty-hearted, this is escape. Third grouping. 165, 23. Herein, what is the type of thread belonging to worlds? For evil action when performed, like new milk, does not turn at once. It follows like a lurking spark. The fool, burning him later on. And the foregoings on a bad way. This is the type of thread belonging to worlds. 166, 24. Herein, what is the type of thread dissociated from worlds? Whose faculties are well and truly quieted. Like horses by a charioteer well trained. With all the conceit in him abandoned, taintless. Then even to the gods he will be dear. And Abicus, I shall teach you the noble superior right concentration. This is the type of thread dissociated from worlds. 167, 25. Herein, what is the type of thread belonging to worlds and dissociated from worlds? As pierced by a down-falling spear. As though he had his head on fire. A mindful bhikkhu sets about. Abandoning lust for sense desires. As pierced by a down-falling spear, as though he had his head on fire, belongs to worlds. A mindful bhikkhu sets about abandoning lust for sense desires, is dissociated from worlds. And Abicus, if there is will for physical nutriment, belongs to worlds, while, if there is no will for it, is dissociated from worlds. 168, 26. Herein, what is action? Someone who kills a breathing thing. Who speaks false speech, who in the world takes to himself what is not given. Who goes to with another's wife. Who has the habit to indulge in drinking spirituous liquor. Unless he these 5 risks abandons, he is proclaimed unvirtuous. And Abicus, there are these 3 kinds of misconduct. This is action. 169, 27. Herein, what is ripening? Full 60,000 years gone by. In ripening in such a form. And Abicus, there are the hells with the 6 bases for contact. Bicus, whatever are the hells with the 6 bases providing contact are all. This is ripening. 170, 28. Herein, what is action and ripening? As the rust stain that grows out of the iron devours the iron wherefrom it takes its growth, so too are led habitual transgressors by their own acts to evil destinations. Herefrom it as the rust stain that grows out of the iron down to by their own acts is action. Are led to evil destinations is ripening. And when one practices the way rightly with regard to 4, namely mother, father, a perfect one, and a perfect one's disciple, the practice of the way rightly is action, while that thereby he reappears among gods is ripening. This is action and ripening. 171, 29. Herein, what is the demonstrated type of thread? With faultless parts and a white awning. The chariot turns on a single spoke. See how it moves quite undisturbed. The stream is cleft, there are no bonds. And the meaning thereof, that the householder sitter demonstrated to the monks. This is how the meaning of this verse was demonstrated. And the 11 terms in the cattle herd simile, that is how a bhikkhu perceives form, down to how he makes extra offerings. These 11 terms, as stated, are the meaning demonstrated of the simile. 172, 30. Herein, what is an undemonstrated meaning? Seclusion is bliss for one content. And who has heard the truth, who sees? Non-affliction is bliss in the world. Restraint towards all breathing things. Fading of lust is bliss in the world. Surmounting sensual desires. Outguiding the conceit, I am. That indeed is the bliss supreme. This is undemonstrated. And the 8 thoughts of a great man, this is undemonstrated. 173, 31. Herein, what is demonstrated and undemonstrated? With clear eyes, with countenance bright, majestic, erect as a flame. In the midst of this body of monks, thou shinest like unto the sun. From and with clear eyes down to thou shinest like unto the sun is demonstrated. That he with the clear eyes is the blessed one, and how he has clear eyes, how he has a fine face, how he has a divine body, how he is erect as a flame, and how he shines, is undemonstrated. And the prose exposition of the lump of froth simile, by as a lump of froth is, so is form, as a bubble is, so is feeling, down to consciousness, the 5 categories are demonstrated with the 5 similes. But the reason why form is similar to a lump of froth, and whether it is all the kind that is cognizable by the eye only, or also that cognizable by the other 4 bases, namely ear, nose, tongue, and body, and how feeling is similar to a bubble, and which kind of feeling it is, whether pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, this is undemonstrated. That is how it is demonstrated and undemonstrated. 174, 32. Herein, what is knowledge? Best in the world is understanding. The kind that deals with penetration. The kind that rightly understands. The exhaustion of birth and death. And there these 3 faculties, the I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty, the active final knowing faculty, and the final knower faculty. This is knowledge. 175, 33. Herein, what is the knowable? Clung to desires, clung with sensual clinging. Seeing nothing blameworthy in fetters. Assuredly those clung with fetter clinging will never cross the vast abounding flood. And possessed of 4 factors, on the dissolution of the body, they reappear among the gods, namely the Kapiya. Thread in the Udna on the incontrovertible confidence. This is the knowable. 176, 34. Herein, what is knowledge and the knowable? And then besides not self are all ideas. And so when he sees thus with understanding, he then dispassion finds in suffering. This path it is that leads to purification. When he sees is knowledge. When he establishes all ideas in the mood of not self, this is the knowable. And the 4 noble truths. Herein, 3 are the knowable, while, as to the path truth, the virtue category and understanding category are knowledge. 177, 35. Herein, what is seeing? This is the only path, no other. For the purification of seeing. So do you practice the way therein. This is bewilderment of MRA. And when a noble hearer is possessed of 4 factors, he could declare himself to himself thus: I have exhausted risk of birth in the hells, down to I am a stream enterer, no longer inseparable from the idea of perdition, certain of rightness, bound for enlightenment. This is seeing. 178, 36. Herein, what is keeping in being? Whose faculties are well maintained in being? As to himself, without, and to all the world. Being a person of wit, perceptive of form. How then shall the deluded come to know him? And of 4 traces of the true idea, non-covetousness, non-ill will, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is keeping in being. 179, 37. Herein, what is seeing and keeping in being? He that opposes none in word or mind, or bodily act, who knows the true idea, aspiring to the state that brings extinction. 'Tis he can wander rightly in the world. And how many ideas must be given attention by one who desires to verify the fruit of stream entry? The Blessed One said, the 5 categories for assumption. This is seeing and keeping in being. 180, 38. Herein, what is ideas inseparable from the idea of ripening? Whatever actions a man does. And because there are these three kinds of good conduct. This is ideas inseparable from the idea of ripening. 181:39. Herein, what is ideas not inseparable from the idea of ripening? Form, and the felt, and then perception. And consciousness, and choice besides. This is not I, nor this myself. When he sees thus his lust fades out. And because there are these five categories. This is ideas not inseparable from the idea of ripening. 182:40. Herein, what is the idea neither inseparable from the idea of ripening nor not inseparable from the idea of ripening? Those who shall practice in this way. The guideline by the Buddha taught. Will make an end of suffering. And carry out the Master's message. So the right practice and cessation are both the idea neither inseparable from the idea of ripening nor not inseparable from the idea of ripening. And because I shall teach you a divine life and the fruits of a divine life. Here the divine life is the noble eight-factored path, while the fruits of the divine life are the fruit of stream entry down to that of arahantship. 183:41. Herein, what is our own statement? No doing any kind of evil. Perfecting profitable skill. And purifying one's own heart. This is the Buddha's dispensation. And because there are these three gateways to liberation. This is our own statement. 184:42. Herein, what is someone else's statement? There is no loved one equal to one's child. There are no riches equal to one's cattle. No radiance is equal to the sun. The sea is sure the greatest of the waters. And Nicosia, good sir, let there be victory in battle by what is well spoken, with it in fact, because this Sakka, ruler of gods, making use of his own merit's fruit, can be quoted in detail. This is someone else's statement. 185:43. Herein, what is our own statement and someone else's statement? What is already reached and is still to be reached are both contaminated with dirt, in him who trains as one still sick. For those with such a doctrine, there is no harm in sense desire. This is someone else's statement. Then for those who do not approach either extreme, there is no describing any round, or rebirth. This is our own statement. And a man with children finds relish through his children. And a property owner likewise through his property. These essentials of existence are a man's relish. Who has them not will never relish find. Which is someone else's statement, while a man with children finds sorrow through his children. And a cattle owner likewise through his cattle. These essentials of existence are a man's sorrow. Who has them not shall never sorrow find. Is our own statement. This is our own statement and another statement. 186:44. Herein, what is expressed in terms of creatures? All beings there are and that will come to be. Will travel on abandoning their bodies. A skilled man knowing all that loss. Would lead the true ideal life divine. And because there are three kinds of teachers. An accomplished perfect one, an initiate, and one practicing the way. This is expressed in terms of creatures. 187:45. Herein, what is expressed in terms of ideas? What sensual bliss is in the world? Or what the bliss in heaven then? All is not worth a 16th part. Of bliss come with exhausted craving. And because there are these 7 enlightenment factors. 188:46. Herein, what is expressed in terms of creatures and expressed in terms of ideas? Unbiased truth is hard to see. Penetration hard for fools to see. For one who knows, for him that sees. There is no relishing, I say. Unbiased truth is hard to see, penetration hard for fools to see, is expressed in terms of ideas, while for one who knows, for him that sees, there is no relishing, I say, is expressed in terms of creatures. And the simile of the balk of timber on the banks of the Ganges, the near bank, the further bank, the being thrown up on dry land, the foundering in the middle, the being seized by non-human beings, and the becoming rotten with are expressed in terms of ideas. The phrase, thus a bhikkhu will be inclined to extinction, is expressed in terms of creatures. This is expressed in terms of creatures and expressed in terms of ideas. 189.47. Herein, what is eulogy? The Eightfold Path is the best of paths. The Four States are the best of truths. Fading of lust the best ideal. And one with vision the best of bipeds. And Bhikkhus, there are these three foremost things, of creatures, an enlightened one, of ideas, the fading of lust, of societies, the community. This is eulogy. 190.48. Herein, what is the agreed? Good is bodily restraint. Good too is restraint of speech. Good as well restraint of mind. Everywhere restraint is good. Everywhere restrained, a bhikkhu is released from every pain. This is agreed by the Blessed One. And Bhikkhus, there are these three things to be done. Bodily good conduct, verbal good conduct, mental good conduct. This is the agreed. 191.49. Herein, what is the refused? There is no loved one equal to one's child. In detail. This is the refused. And Bhikkhus, there are these three things not to be done, which are taught by me after acquaintance with them. What are three? Bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, mental misconduct. This is the refused. 192.50. Herein, what is the agreed and refused? Let him do profit by the body. His body being then restrained. Leaving misconduct by the body. Let him pursue good bodily conduct. With the first two lines and with the fourth he agrees, while with the third line, leaving misconduct by the body, he refuses. And the four persons, in the great analysis of action. 193, herein, these are the mnemonic verses. Now if thou art afraid of pain, and have no relish for the future, like an umbrella in time of rain, what purpose has the profitable? And then not self are all ideas. It would not move a man possessing. Thou wilt no safety find from pain. And also quiet and insight too. Owing to lust for sense desires. He is devoured by his thoughts. Enlightenment factors kept in being. He the tangle disentangles. Then look upon the world as void. And keep in being concentration. If his desires when desiring. Good destination from true conduct. Deformed as if pierced by a barb. Crushing from all the four directions. And also he that shuns desires. The Peṭakopadesa simile. Whatever actions a man does. The worldly 8 ideas displayed. And merit's ripening is pleasant. No third alternative exists. Knowing the fear from that assuming. That is it born and that it dies. Sense desires are many and varied. The simile of the salt crystal. 4 evil actions when performed. And he that goes by the bad ways. Whose faculties are truly quieted. And the noble, concentration. As pierced by a down-falling spear. When consciousness has a steadying point. Someone who kills a breathing thing. And then misconduct of 3 kinds. Full 60,000 years gone by. And difficult to find the moment. And as the stain upon the iron. And in the 4 right practices. With faultless parts and a white awning. The simile of the cattle owner. Seclusion bliss for the contented. And when the 8 thoughts are well taught. The simile of the lump of froth. With clear eyes and bright countenance. Best in the world is understanding. 3 faculties with none besides. Such creatures clung to sense desires. and controverted confidence. Besides, not self are all ideas. The noble truth as it is taught. This is the only path, no other. Declares himself stream enterer, whose faculties are kept in being, and traces of the true idea, opposing none in words or mind. Impermanent 5 categories. Whatever actions a man does. There are 3 kinds of conduct: good, form and feeling and perception. 5 categories are displayed. He that shall practice in this way, and then the fruits of life divine. No doing any kind of evil. Gateways to liberation taught. There is no loved one like one's child. The gods and the asura demons. The already reached, the not yet reached. Relish and sorrow everlasting. Whatever beings are and will be. What kinds of teachers are displayed? Outguiding sensual bliss in the world. 7 enlightenment factors taught. Unbiased truth is hard to see. The balk of timber simile. The eightfold is the best of paths. And then the 3 foremost described. And good is bodily restraint. And what is to be done as taught. There is no loved one like one's child. And what should not be done as taught. Let him do profit by the body. The great analysis of action. In the Peṭakopadesa disclosure, the 2nd chapter, called the pattern of the dispensation, is completed. The Peṭakopadesa disclosure. 3. Terms of expression in the thread. I. Schedules. 194. Herein, what are the thread's terms of expression? They are happy smiley. I. The 6 roots. Expression in terms of greed. Expression in terms of hate. Expression in terms of delusion. Expression in terms of non-greed. Expression in terms of non-hate. Expression in terms of non-delusion. 2. The 3 kinds of action. Expression in terms of bodily action. Expression in terms of verbal action. Expression in terms of mental action. 3. The 5 faculties. Expression in terms of the faith faculty. Expression in terms of the energy faculty. Expression in terms of the mindfulness faculty. Expression in terms of the concentration faculty. Expression in terms of the understanding faculty. 2. Illustrative details. I. The 6 roots. A. Unshared quotations. 195. 1. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of greed? With a man engrossed in thoughts, and strong in lust, and beauty seeing, then grows his craving more and more, the while he makes his bondage firm. 196. With a man engrossed in thoughts is lust for sensual desires, and beauty seeing is the object of the lust for sensual desires. Then grows his craving more and more, is craving for sensual desires. The while he makes his bondage firm is lust. In this way, whatever the idea presented as the root, that idea alone should be taken up here. For the Blessed One does not teach an idea other than the idea he is instigated by. Of someone who thinks sensual desire thinking, he demonstrates that same thinking by sensual desire thinking. By strong in lust he demonstrates that same thinking's object. By and beauty seeing, then grows his craving more and more, he demonstrates that same lust as craving for sensual desires. By the while he makes his bondage firm, he demonstrates that same lust as the fetter of craving. 197. That is how it should be assessed in the case of verses, and likewise in the case of prose expositions. 198. Herein, the Blessed One demonstrates a single idea in 3 ways, as to outcome, as to cause, and as to fruit. For example, happy smiley. When giving, a man is dear and many frequent him. The name he gets is good, his fame increases. He enters an assembly undismayed. A man intrepid, without avarice. 199. When giving any gift, which is the ground for making merit consisting in giving, this is the cause herein. And that many frequent him, and that, with the words a good name spreads abroad in the world, and that he is dear and agreeable to many people, and that he dies without remorse, this is the outcome. That, on the dissolution of the body he reappears among the gods, is the fruit. This is expressed in terms of greed. 202. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of hate? Someone who kills a breathing thing. Who speaks false speech, who in the world takes to himself what is not given. Who goes to unto another's wife. Who has the habit to indulge in drinking spirituous liquor. Unless he these 5 risks abandons, he is proclaimed unvirtuous. And on the body's dissolution, the stupid man appears in hell. 201. Someone who kills a breathing thing, one who is affected by hate kills a breathing thing. Who speaks false speech, also one who speaks false speech owing to vexation by hate. Who has the habit to indulge in drinking spirituous liquor, there is a source for hate, and he who indulges in drinking spirituous liquor finds, like him who goes with another's wife, that enemies spring up. Unless he these 5 risks abandons, refers to the transgression of the 5 training precepts, and this is a description of them when they are all hate-born. 202. And this idea too can be demonstrated as to cause, as to outcome, and as to fruit. 203. There are 3 fools' characteristics of a fool. He is a speaker of the ill-spoken, a cogitator of the ill-cogitated, a doer of the ill-done. 204. Herein, that he is aggressive by body or by speech, this is his state of a doer of the ill-done. And likewise the false speech he speaks, as already demonstrated, is his state of a speaker of the ill-spoken. And that he intends the mental misconduct consisting in ill will, this is his state of a cogitator of the ill-cogitated. Since he is possessed of these fools' characteristics, he exists with the 3 types of pain and grief correspondingly born therefrom. And when he has gone to a meeting or gone to an assembly he talks the type of talk born therefrom. And when this 10-fold course of unprofitable action, beginning with killing breathing things comes into being, with that as source he experiences pain and grief. Furthermore, when he sees a felon who has offended the king arrested by the king and put to death, then it occurs to him, if the king knew about me, he might have me put to death too, and with that as source he experiences pain and grief. Furthermore, when a fool is on his chair, down to, that will be my destination, with that as source he experiences pain and grief. 205. Accordingly, the fool's characteristic is the cause, the 3 corresponding kinds of pain born therefrom are the outcome, and that on the dissolution of the body he reappears in hell is the fruit. This is expressed in terms of hate. 206. 3. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of delusion? Were one to go the round of births, as much as 100,000 eons, or even more than that besides, traveling on from womb to womb, never accepting the Buddha's word, accepting determinations as self, that one shall make an end of pain, is utterly impossible. 207. He who is pursuing the roundabout of births, which has no recognizable end, has ignorance for his cause. And the purposes of determinative acts have ignorance for their condition. That the unseeing of the Buddha's word is ignorance is demonstrated in the thread 2. And in so far as he who is ignorant treats determinations as self, and allows the 5 views in regard to the 5 categories thus, this is mine, this is I, this is myself, this thread is consequently presented under ignorance. Now the master presents it thus in the thread under ignorance. And so, there must only be demonstrated there the unshared idea, by which he demonstrates it, not any other. 208. Because, whatever monks or divines do not understand, this is suffering, and the rest of the 4 truths in detail. Now the non-understanding herein is suffering, this is the outcome. When not understanding, he determines the various kinds of determinations. This is the cause. In so far as B misapprehends the type of views thus, only this is the true, the other is wrong, this too is the outcome. The renewal of being that he generates is the fruit. And so this idea too is demonstrated as to cause, as to fruit, and as to outcome. But here in the case of these three, some ideas, that is, fruit and outcome, may appear shared in common, and then only the cause, as a beginning, will be presented in a thread. How would that be? For example, because there are these foregoings on a bad way. Herein, when someone goes a bad way through will and goes a bad way through fear, this is the unprofitable root greed. When he does so through hate, this is simply hate, and when he does so through delusion, this is simply delusion. Thus these three unprofitable roots should be regarded as only a beginning, that is, as cause. Where one is demonstrable, there he demonstrates 1, likewise 2, likewise 3, 4 when not presented as a beginning, no cause or outcome or fruit can be demonstrated. And the verse here is this. When a man strays from the true idea, through will, hate, fear, or else delusion, he finds his good fame wanes away, as in its dark half does the moon. Herein, will and fear are greed, as demonstrated above. This is expressed in terms of delusion. 209:4. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of non-greed? Who contemplating ugliness abides, with faculties restrained, knowing the right amount in eating, faithful and energetic too, him MIA sure no more can shake than can the wind a rocky peak. 210. Herein, the scrutiny of ugliness is the giving up of gratification through perception of beauty by seeing the disappointment in sensual desires. That he has restrained his faculties is the fulfillment of that same non-greed by not assuming any grieving for those sensual desires regarded as mine. Knowing the right amount in eating is the abandoning of craving for tastes. 211. So when this non-greed is remembered as the basis for the state of a contemplator of ugliness, that non-greed is a cause. When remembered as the province of guardedness in the faculty doors, and when remembered besides as that of the state of knowing the right amount in eating, then this is the outcome. That him MIA sure no more can shake than can the wind a rocky peak is the fruit. So it is the same idea presented in the beginning that is also in the middle and the end. 212. The basis for non-greed is this, because, for the non-arising of unarisen will for sensual desires, for the abandoning of arisen will for sensual desires, I see no idea other than the sign of ugliness. Herein, in one who gives the sign of ugliness attention, the unarisen will for sensual desires does not arise, and the arisen is abandoned. But in so far as it is only unarisen lust for sensual desires that is gripped in this way, the fruit has both a lust for form and lust for the formless. So this idea too has been demonstrated as to cause, as to outcome, and as to fruit. This is expressed in terms of non-greed. 213:5. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of non-hate? Should a man with no hate in his heart kindly love one breathing thing only, by that he is skilled. But when he feels pity for all breathing things, he has infinite scope in the merit he makes. 214. Should a man with no hate in his heart kindly love one breathing thing only, this non-hate is gratification through counteraction. By that he is skilled, it is owing to his being associated with that skillful, profitable idea that he comes under the description in terms of ideas, namely skilled, just as it is owing to understanding, that he is so described as having understanding, and owing to wisdom, that he is so described as wise. He has infinite scope in the merit he makes, the ripening of that is ripening only of the kind of action belonging to the worlds, not of that dissociated from worlds. 215. Herein, the kindly loving is the cause, that he is skilled is the outcome. The great merit he produces, extending as far as the plane of non-ill will does, is the fruit. So in the case of non-hate, too, it has been demonstrated as to cause, as to outcome, and as to fruit. 2:16, there are 11 benefits, from the heart deliverance of loving kindness. 2:17, herein, the heart deliverance of loving kindness, which in the ideas of the noble ones is the heart deliverance due to fading of lust, is the cause on the plane belonging to the worlds. That he sleeps blissfully, is agreeable to human beings, these 11 ideas are the outcome. And that he arises in the body of the retinue of high divinity, as one who has not yet done is the fruit. This is expressed in terms of non-hate. 2:18, 6. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of non-delusion? Best in the world is understanding. The kind that deals with penetration. The kind that rightly understands. The exhaustion of birth and death. 2:19, best, is understanding, is the basis for non-delusion. The kind that deals with penetration, is the kind that deals with extinction, since it penetrates how things are. The kind that rightly understands the exhaustion of birth and death, is non-delusion. 2:20, the understanding is the cause. That he understands is the outcome. The exhaustion of birth and death is the fruit. So non-delusion has been demonstrated by cause, by outcome, and by fruit. 2:21, because, there are these three faculties. The I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty, the active final knowing faculty, and the final knower faculty. Herein, what is the I shall come to know finally the as yet not finally known faculty? Here, because, a bhikkhu arouses will for the actualizing of the as yet unactualized noble truth of suffering, and he makes efforts, instigates energy, exerts his cognizance, and endeavors. And so it should be quoted for the rest of the four truths. Herein, what is the active final knowing faculty? Here, because, a bhikkhu understands how it is that this is suffering, down to the path. This is active final knowing faculty, and that he is taintless, with exhaustion of taints, this is called the final knower faculty. 2:22, likewise the understanding is the cause. That he arouses will and makes efforts, and that he understands, is the outcome. That whereby there is entire exhaustion of taints is the cause. That knowledge of exhaustion arises, and also knowledge of non-arising, is the outcome. The arahantship is the fruit. Herein, the words birth is exhausted for me, the divine life has been lived out, done is what was to be done, refer to a knowledge of exhaustion, and the words, there is no more of this beyond, refer to knowledge of non-arising. These are the three faculties. So non-delusion, too, has been demonstrated as to cause, as to outcome and as to fruit. This is expressed in terms of non-delusion. 2:23, these have been demonstrated by unshared quotations. B. Shared quotations. 2:24, 4-6. Herein, what are those where the profitable roots are shared? Because, I shall teach you the profitable and the root of the profitable. 2:25, herein, what is the root of the profitable? It is non-greed, non-hate, and non-delusion. 2:26, herein, what is the profitable? It is the 8 rightnesses, right view, down to right concentration. 2:27, herein, the 3 roots of the profitable are the cause, and that non-greed molds the 3 kinds of action, namely the right intention, right effort, and right concentration. This is the outcome of the non-greed. Herein, the non-hate is the cause, and that it founds right speech, right action, and right livelihood, this is its outcome. Herein, the non-delusion is the cause, and that it establishes 2 ideas, namely the undistorted seeing, in right view, and the direct addressing, in right mindfulness, this is its outcome. The fruit of this divine life is the 2 kinds of deliverance, namely the heart deliverance due to fading of lust and the understanding deliverance due to fading of ignorance. This is the fruit. 2:28, so these 3 roots of the profitable have been demonstrated as to cause, as to outcome, and as to fruit. This is how the kinds of the profitable can be penetrated as shared in common at both, where there are 2, so shared, and where there are 3. 2:29, now here is a relevant verse. The stilled one dropped the being determinant. That gives existence measured and unmeasured. And happy in himself and concentrated. Self-existence he sundered like a mail coat. 230. As to that gives existence measured and unmeasured, the measured is the determined and the unmeasured is the undetermined. Herein, there are two ideas which, as measured, are determined, namely gratification and disappointment, and they are measured as follows. In the case of sensual desires the gratification is this much, the disappointment is this much, and he understands extinction thus. In the case of this the escape is this. The unmeasured cannot be measured for two reasons. It is not measured as follows: this is just so much, there is not more of it past this point, and then it is not measured in its wonderfulness, by making some jewel reach it. 231. Herein, the act of knowing and act of seeing that give existence to the profitable are non-delusion. The rejection of the being determinants known therein is non-greed. The words happy in himself and concentrated, which deny distraction, signify non-hate. So these are the three roots of the profitable. 232. That gives existence measured and unmeasured, this is non-delusion, the greed for the being determinants meeting together, which is the gratification due to right concentration, is the cause. The breaking, happy in oneself, of the eggshell of ignorance is the outcome. That is occurrence. 233. These three roots of the profitable have now been demonstrated as to cause, as to outcome, and as to fruit. 234. 1-6. Up to this point this is both occurrence and stopping. It occurs by means of the roots of unprofit, and it stops by means of the roots of profit, thus all the unprofitable meets together with these three roots of profit. For any defilement verbally demonstrated in the true idea, 2, as say craving, or as anger, or as unawareness, or underlying tendency, as contempt, or domineering, as unmindfulness, as envy or avarice, as unknowing, can be demonstrated by those three basic examples too, of which defilement in general these two-term traces of the true idea are demonstrated. In fact, there is no defilement that comes to be combined and to meet together in these 9 terms, which defilement is not greed, and not hate, and not delusion. 235. And the roots of unprofit like the roots of profit can be demonstrated in the opposite sense. 2. The three kinds of action. A. Unshared quotations. 236. 7. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of bodily action? Let him do profit by the body. His body being then restrained. Leaving misconduct by the body. Let him pursue good bodily conduct. And there are these three kinds of good bodily conduct: abstention from killing breathing things, from taking what is not given, abstention from misconduct in sensual desires. This is expressed in terms of bodily action. 237. 8. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of verbal action? The just say that what is well spoken is best. And speak what is right and not wrong for the second. And speak what is kind, not unkind, for the third. And speak what is true and not false for the fourth. And there are these 4 kinds of good verbal conduct. This is expressed in terms of verbal action. 238. 9. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of mental action? Let there be mental acts of profit. Let him be well restrained in mind. Mental misconduct abandoning. Pursuing good conduct in the mind. And because there are these 3 kinds of good mental conduct: non-covetousness, non-ill will, and right view. This is expressed in terms of mental action. These are unshared threads. B. Shared quotations. 239. 7-9. Herein what are shared threads? Who guards his speech, is well restrained in mind. Does no unprofit through the body's means. Who purifies this triple course of action. Will win the path the seers have divulged. And because there are these 3 purities: purity of bodily action, purity of verbal action, purity of mental action. Herein, what is purity of bodily action? It is abstention from killing breathing things, abstention from taking what is not given, abstention from misconduct in sensual desires. Herein, what is purity of verbal action? It is abstention from false speech, abstention from gossip. Herein, what is purity of mental action? It is non-covetousness, non-ill will, right view. This is the shared type of thread. 240. That is how shared threads and unshared threads can be penetrated. After penetrating them thus, the thread's meaning can be demonstrated as to speech and as to body. 3. The five faculties. A. Unshared quotations. 241, 10. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of the faith faculty? Who in a perfect one has faith? Immovable and well established. Whose own good virtue is the kind, desired and praised by noble ones, with confidence in the community. Whose seeing has been straitened too. He is not one they call a pauper. His life has not been lived in vain. And at all of Nandia, one who has faith wins through, not one who is faithless, and might there be such confidence in the Blessed One. This is expressed in terms of the faith faculty. 242, 11. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of the energy faculty? Instigate yourselves, launch out, devote yourselves on the enlightened one's dispensation. Scatter the armies of mortality. As does an elephant a hut of reeds. And Abicus, there are these four right endeavors. This is expressed in terms of the energy faculty. 243, 12. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of the mindfulness faculty? The mindful man has always luck. Let there be luck for the mindful man. One mindful always comes off better. One mindful easily succeeds. And four foundations of mindfulness can be quoted in detail. This is expressed in terms of the mindfulness faculty. 244, 13. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of the concentration faculty? O leader of men to be tamed. When you intend no gods or men or even all, the whole array of breathing things can know what is thought in your mind, using the quiet concentration, without conflict. And Abicus, there are these three kinds of concentration, with thinking and with exploring, without thinking and with only exploring, without thinking and without exploring. This is expressed in terms of the concentration faculty. 245, 14. Herein, what is that expressed in terms of the understanding faculty? Best in the world is understanding, in detail. And Abicus, there are these three kinds of understanding, that consisting in what is heard, that consisting in cogitation, and that consisting in keeping in being. This is the type of thread expressed in terms of the understanding faculty. B. Shared quotations. 246. One not without lust for sense desires, and whose five faculties are blunt. Copy not such as him, O bhikkhu, for he is still attached thereto. And there are these five faculties, namely the faith faculty, etc. See the Indriya Sayuta, and to quote the thread in detail about the three kinds of confidence due to undergoing. These are threads expressed in terms of the faculties shared. 247. Whichever the faculty may be, whether its context is that of profit or unprofit, the thread in question should be demonstrated by those terms of expression, no other idea than that should be demonstrated. 248. Herein, the shared is only the profitable, there is no profitable unprofitable, as there are shared profitable roots and shared unprofitable roots, namely, he abandons arisen sensual desire thinking, and the right endeavors are in profitable and unprofitable contexts. 249. Here is a mnemonic verse. When a man is engrossed in thoughts. Also, when giving, a man is dear. Someone who kills a breathing thing. Three characteristics of a fool. As much as 100,000 eons. Also whatever monks or divines. Through will, hate, fear, or else delusion. When going on the four bad ways. Who contemplating ugliness. And ugliness in signs as well. Should a man love a single creature? Loving kindness if kept in being. Best in the world is understanding. 3 faculties there are, no less. The root of profit and unprofit. Gives being, measured and unmeasured. When doing profit by the body. And then the 3 bodily misconducts. The just call best what is well spoken. Good kinds of verbal conduct, 2. By mind let there be profit done. Good kinds of mental conduct, 2. And then who always guards his speech. And the 3 kinds of purity. Who in a perfect one has faith. And what is taught in co-rising. And instigate yourselves, launch out. And then the state of right endeavor. The mindful man has always luck. Makes mindfulness foundations be. He has no knowledge though he wishes. And the 3 kinds of concentration. Best in the world is understanding. 3 understandings are displayed. Not without lust for sense desires. And so too the 5 faculties. So in the elder Marcacciana, the rose apple would dwell as Piarca, disclosure the 3rd chapter called the threads terms of expression.